Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. If you watched my last video, you know that my group and I finished our very successful Shadowdark the Gloaming campaign several months ago, and that I've been trying to figure out what to GM ever since, and that I've had a little trouble figuring it out. Well, I've finally settled on two games that I'll be running in the near future. First up, D&D 2024. More specifically, I'll be returning to the Red March campaign, which is set in the world of Salanth. Salanth is my answer to the reimagined world of Greyhawk that appears in the 2024 DMG. Suffice to say that I don't like the reimagined Greyhawk. It simply doesn't appeal to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not like a lot of people who complain about quote-unquote wokeness in Wizards of the Coast products. I love diversity, and I love that Dungeons & Dragons is more open and accepting of people and tries to represent everyone. However, I do think that the way the company approaches this is very sloppy. I don't like that everyone and everything is just blended together in this completely decontextualized way that doesn't make any sense. It just lacks any sense of verisimilitude, and it becomes quite silly. Now, I don't mind if a pirate and a samurai are hanging out together, but I do want them to be doing so in a world that makes sense and to have some sort of justifiable reason for being in that situation. So, Salanth was my attempt to create a world that would work for my table, one that preserved the diversity of modern D&D, but provided a context that made sense to me. This isn't groundbreaking. Plenty of other games do similar things. Golarion has clear cultural analogs. Historical RPGs do this all the time, and it's basically the approach that works in games like the 7th Sea or Legend of the Five Rings. But I needed something that worked for my group. So here's the approach that I took. First, it's a massive world with multiple continents, each home to different cultures that developed independently. You've got your Sixfold League, which is basically ancient Greek city-states. You've got Valeros, which is like Renaissance Venice. There's Zamir's Dunes, inspired by Arabian cultures, and Helan Province, which draws from Imperial China, and so on and so forth. These are pretty obvious real-world analogs. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Obviously, these are fantasy interpretations inspired by real-world cultures, not attempts to accurately represent them, but having clear cultural touchstones helps my players understand what they're dealing with, and then I can develop the internal logic and complexity from there. The key is that these cultures are geographically separated. They exist in different regions of the world, so they've developed their own distinct societies, languages, and customs. So when a samurai from the Jade Empire meets a pirate from Calastres Bay, it's because they've traveled across vast distances or because trade routes have brought them together, not because they just randomly exist in the same generic fantasy village. The gods in Salanth work similarly. Rather than having completely different pantheons, the same cosmic forces are interpreted differently by different cultures. So the god of war might be Tyrion to humans in the West, but Gorak to orcs and Viran in Calastres Bay. Same divine force, different cultural understanding. For my table, this approach gives us the diversity we want while maintaining cultural coherence and logical world building. With this broad framework in place, I decided to focus my starting campaign in the Ironhold Orc Kingdoms. And what I tried to do with the orcs in Salanth is embrace the ideas presented in D&D 2024, but in ways that made more sense to me. They're not inherently evil. The player's handbook says orcs trace their creation to Grummash, a powerful god who roams the wide open spaces of the material plane. Grummash equipped his children with gifts to help them wander great plains, vast caverns, and churning seas. Player's handbook also talks about their ancestors' great travels and travails, and how many orcs wonder when Grummash will call on them to match the heroic deeds of old. That's all very vague and very rosy, but there are enough elements about travel, movement, and exploration or expansion that I thought could fold into a concept of Manifest Destiny. So I decided to have the orcs in this setting be expansionistic. They're not quite monotheistic. They follow Grummash, but they also have Ragrax, the Keeper of Ancestors, and Zargala, the Huntress of the Wilds. Grummash is definitely their primary deity, with the others being more like saints or attendants in their theology. They really do feel like they have this mandate from Grummash to spread their culture and better the world by doing so. Basically, I've decided to turn the orcs into us. And by us, I mean the United States, at least as we were in the 19th century. And we can debate whether or not we're still like that. That's another question. Anyway, this means that they're capable of great good and great evil. There's a complexity there. Not all orcs feel the same, and not all orcs embrace that mandate, but it is definitely one that is prevalent in their culture. The orcs are the dominant power in the Ironhold kingdoms. They invaded from the north into an area that's roughly analogous to Southern European and Celtic lands, and they got as far as an analog to the Iberian Peninsula, where they were held back. And that's the spot where the campaign begins. Red March is a keep, admittedly on the borderlands, between the Ironhold orc kingdoms and the Scarred lands. These are territories that were devastated by infernal forces summoned by people who lived there to try to resist the orcs. Red March preserves some measure of its autonomy by virtue of where it is, too dangerous for the orcs to fully control, but too useful to completely abandon. It's a perfect setting for adventure. You've got multiple factions, complex politics, ancient ruins filled with cursed magic, and the constant tension between order and chaos. In future videos, I'll talk more about what we've already done in this setting prior to my summer decision to revitalize this campaign. And I'll also tell you a little bit about the characters and keep you up to date on a daily basis of the prep that I'm undergoing to get this back to the table. But again, that's for future videos. Embracing the short form here. So thank you for tuning in. And as always, I wish you good health. I wish you good cheer. I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.